الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على رسول محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألا إن أولياء الله لا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون آمنت بالله صدق الله العظيم. All praises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the most choicest blessings be upon the Prophet of Prophets, the leader of the Prophet, Sayyidina Imam al-Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam. We are blessed to be in the masjid in these difficult times, and these days mark the great month of Sayyidina Ghaus Azam radiyallahu ta'ala an. And much can be said about this great man, and I say great man, but really I'm sure that he doesn't require a lengthy introduction, because he was from amongst the greatest men in the ummah of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and amongst the awliya and the awliya in the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Indeed, first position comes to Sayyidina Ghaus Azam Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani rahimahullah ta'ala. Now, one thing is for sure, that we know this, that with the awliya and the awliya kamilin, that there are different types of walis. There are wahbi walis, there are kasbi walis. Like, for example, the ulama say that Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani rahimahullah ta'ala, he was a wahbi wali, he was a born wali Allah. He didn't acquire this status later in it, he was born and blessed with it. Like, for example, Sayyidah Maryam salamullah alayha, she acquired this status by birth, and it was given at birth. Now, amazing it is that Ghaus Pak Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani, even though he's a born wali Allah, even though he's born on the 1st of Ramadan, even though he's born in a household where his father Hazrat Musa Jangi Dost rahmatullah alayhi was a wali Allah. His mother Sayyida al Khair rahmatullah alayha, she was a waliya. Subhanallah. And not only a waliya, she was from the descendancy of Sayyidina Imam Hussein radiyallahu anhu. And his father was from the descendancy of Sayyidina Imam Hassan radiyallahu anhu. And he was, and they say he was full blood Sayyid and family and descendant of Rasul Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from his mother's side and from his father's side. And he is brought up in such a household. He is a born wali Allah. But even then, at the age of 18, his father has already passed away by now. At the age of 18, what does he say to his mother? He said he asks her for permission. She's very old by now. And they live in Gilan in Iran. And he says to his mother, he goes, let me go to the center of knowledge. Let me go to Baghdad Sharif in Iraq, and let me go and acquire the study of Ilm Din there. So this man is a born wali Allah. But even then, he is saying to his mother, he's asking for permission and ijazat that he can go and he can go study the knowledge and the sacred sciences of the Deen of Islam. And it's amazing that, I find this conversation amazing, that, and we should really try and reflect on this more, that I know it's very widely narrated this, that, the only promise his mother takes from him, the only promise she takes from him, she goes, promise me that whatever you do, wherever you go, you will maintain sidq, you will maintain truthfulness, sincerity, khulus. This is what she was saying to. This is the promise she took from her son, Sayyid Abdul Qadir Jilani, rahimahullah ta'ala. And it's amazing that, think about it, in the morning when we send our kids out to school, or when we send them away to university, what do we say to them? Make sure you go sleep on time, make sure you eat your food well, make sure you do this way. But how many of us actually sit there and say, don't forget to follow in the footsteps of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Don't forget to read at least the hadith of Rasul Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam every night before you go to sleep. Don't forget to recite the Quran every day, because there's tremendous barakah in this. And if you leave these ways, then you are leaving the ways of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You are leaving the ways of the awliya nizam. You are leaving these ways. And Sayyidina Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani rahmatullah alayhi, in his life, what did he say? He said, Darastul ilma hatta sirtul qutba. He said, first I acquired knowledge then I became a Qutb. He says, then I became, this is a born waliullah. But even he's saying, I acquired ilm deen. He said, after that I became a Qutb in the ranks of the awliya. Because the awliya, they have a government. Yes, even the awliya, they have a government. And in that government, there's pecking orders amongst even the awliya. And the title of Qutb, or the position of Qutb, is very, very senior, very high. And Ghaus al-Azam, he says that once I acquired knowledge, the sciences, he says, then I acquired this position of Qutb. And it's amazing that, he was a born with, these days we have, people, sons of ulama, children of ulama, mashallah, ulama Zafar Mahmud Qibla, even their children, they're from amongst the ulama. They've studied ilm deen, they're from amongst the ulama. I'm not talking illa mashallah, these are pious households. But I'm talking about many, many households where perhaps, you have fathers who did minat. The position of Qutb is very, very senior, very high. And Ghaus al-Azam, he says that once I acquired knowledge, the sciences, he says, then I acquired this position of Qutb. And it's amazing that, he was a born with, these days we have, people, sons of ulama, children of ulama, mashallah, ulama Zafar Mahmud Qibla, even their children, they're from amongst the ulama. They've studied ilm deen, they're from amongst the ulama. I'm not talking illa mashallah, these are pious households. But I'm talking about many, many households where perhaps, you have fathers who did minat. They made effort in their life, but the children, they didn't take the ways of their father. They sat on the thrones, or from the houses of, the shaykhs and the peers. And they will sit on the thrones and they'll say, we are now the inheritors, and we're the successors of our fathers, or our family members. But no effort. They won't put any effort into it. But this is not what was taught to us by Sayyidina Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, rahmatullah alayh. And I say this, Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, he took this thing of sidq, and he preserved it in his life. And even the ulama say that those people who are honest, those people who never lie, those people who are people of sincerity, Allah blesses them in all ways. Even in the dunya, in the akhirah, Allah will bless them. And one thing we know about Ghaus al-Azam, rahimallahu ta'ala, he was a businessman. Even though he was a businessman. And he was extremely successful businessman. He used to own a business to do, dealing with special types of expensive stone, carnelian stones and things like this. And Ghaus al-Azam, rahimahullah ta'ala, he knew, and whatever he had, it was from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but he wasn't attached to the dunya. We get £1,000 or £10,000 and we're so attached to it. We check our accounts every day, it's still there. And we move it to one account and move it to the back to the other account, £50, I have control, this is my money. We go crazy about it, right? And we don't want anything to be reduced from that, any deductions to come from that. We're so attached to the dunya. But this is not the way of the awliya nizam. Why? Because Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, rahimallahu ta'ala, he used to have massive ships that used to go, and they used to take his expensive stones from one country to another for trade. And people would come to him and they would say, Ya Shaykh, your ship has been wrecked, it's been lost in the water. Many thousands, probably more according to the ulama, of value of stones were lost. And whatever would happen, he would say, he would refer back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You would not see a line on his forehead of stress. And this was the way of Ghaus Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. Even though, in fact, one day, a seeker came to his palace. And when I say palace, I mean he had a palace. It was not just a palace, it was a super palace. The animals were tied in gold and silver. There was a super throne where Ghaus al-Azam Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani was sat. Ministers of the world used to come and see. Sayyidina Ghaus Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani. This one man comes, he's a seeker and he's a traveller. And he comes with his stick on his shoulder like this. That's all he owned. His stick with his shoulder like this. And on the end of it, he had a cloth and he tied his possessions and his belongings, whatever he had, 1, 2, 3 pairs of clothes, necessities, he had it like this on his shoulder. And he comes to Ghaus al-Azam, and he comes searching for, he heard about the great Ghaus al-Azam, rahimahullah ta'ala. So when he comes to this palace, he's surprised. He can't believe what he sees. Super palace, money everywhere, the riches, he couldn't believe it. So when he sees this, he goes, okay, maybe it's a mistake, let me go inside, let me find out what, this great sheikh is all about. So he goes and he sits with Gauss Azam. When he's looking around, he sees the ministers running around, the servants, the thing. He can't believe it. And he sees Gauss Azam. He sat in his chair on the throne. And he sat there, and he can't believe it. When he comes, he goes, "Ya Shaykh," he goes, "I've come to see you, Shaykh Abdul Qadir." And when Gauss Azam looked at him, they did tawajjuh on him. They could see in his heart what he was thinking. Because the man was thinking, "I don't understand. This is a great wali Allah, but then he's in such luxury. How can this be? He has everything around him." Gauss Azam says, "Come with me." He says, "Come with me, let's go somewhere." And they go into the middle of the jungle. Suddenly they get up and they go into the middle of the jungle. And he says to him, he says, "Where are we going? Where are we going?" Gauss Azam said, "Look, come with me, don't worry about that. Come with me, when we get there, I'll tell you." When they arrive in the middle of the jungle, the man says to him, he says, "Ya Gauss Azam, what have you brought me here for?" He says, "I've come here, let's do ibadat together for a couple of years." And he says, "Couple of years?" He says, "Okay, that's fine. You should have just told me before. I left my stick and my belongings back at your palace. Let me just get them and I'll bring them back." And he said to him, "Stop." Gauss Azam said, "Stop." He said, "Listen." He said, "You seen my super palaces. You seen all this wealth and all this money that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed me with." He said, "But I didn't think twice. I left everything in an instant and I came here for a couple of years to pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you had one stick with maybe a couple of clothes in there, and even you couldn't forget that. Even you couldn't forget that, and you wanted to go again." He says, "This is the difference between me and you." He says, "Dunya, you are attached to it." He said, "Me, I'm not attached to this dunya. Whatever he gives, whatever he takes, is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala." And we remember the awliya kamilin, and we remember the great awliya, people like Gauss Azam, Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani. But we should remember their infatuation with the ilm of the deen. We should remember how they weren't concerned with dunya, with wealth, and how they distanced themselves from these things. This was the true colors of Sayyidina Rasul Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. These men didn't just obtain these titles and these statuses and remember till now, even now, for no reason. It was because